Great. So I'm so happy to be here to talk about hormones. And I really wanted to start with a story about something that happened just a few weeks ago when I was speaking to a 16-year-old. And it was at a family event, and she's experiencing a lot of acne. And she was busy telling everyone about all the treatments that she's doing to try and help her acne. And so she was, listing off all these treatments. And I said to her, well, like, what else have you tried yourself? Like, what have you tried that could be from within you that could change, your diet, something about your lifestyle? And of course, she said, well, nothing, because, innocently, she believes, like so many of us do believe, oh, that's just my hormones, right? That's just my hormones going a bit mad when I'm a teenager. Because for her, she looks at the situation of, oh, when I wasn't a teenager and my hormones weren't in flux, I didn't have acne. Now my hormones are in flux and I've got acne. It must just be my hormones. There's nothing I can do about that apart from just treat something from the outside. Now, I have a story about my skin, because I used to have, as a teenager, incredibly sensitive skin. I used to, all my friends would be able to wear these big earrings in the 80s, and I couldn't because they were made of crap metal, and my ears would just swell up from infection. And any makeup that I tried experimenting with, which back then was sort of blue mascara and blue eyeliner, then that would like not work, because I was so sensitive to everything, and I had tons of rashes and wheals and sensitivities to everything. And I just became the girl with sensitive skin. And what's interesting is that come my 20s and 30s, that calmed down, and the rashes calmed down and the wheals calmed down. And then as I came into my 40s, and there's another period of hormonal change as women move towards menopause, which is not what we think often in society, that menopause is going to be really short and just 1 year or something of hot flashes, but it can actually take 10 years. I started to get skin problems again, and I started to have terrible eczema. Now, the only other time I'd had this terrible eczema on my hands was when I was pregnant with my first child, and I was in a corporate job working incredibly stupid hours for a pregnant woman and having a lot of stress, and my hands were so cut up with eczema. I had to use creams all the time, which is really inconvenient when you're trying to type big documents on your computer. And so that was in my first pregnancy, not in my second and third pregnancies, interestingly, when I wasn't in the corporate world. And here it was coming back again while I was having these hormonal changes as I moved towards menopause, as I was in perimenopause. So I could totally look at that situation as this 16-year-old girl had looked at her situation, say, oh, that's just my hormones, right? That's just my hormones. They're out of control. Anytime my hormones are out of control, that's what happens. Except that when you're a teenager, when you're pregnant, and when you're moving towards menopause, your hormones are doing like really different things. So it's not actually the hormones, but it is this time of sensitivity. When my hormones are fluctuating, my skin gets sensitive. Now, what's really interesting is I was able to clear up my eczema in my perimenopausal years, not through creams, drugs, anything like that. It was actually just through insight. Once I had an insight of how, essentially, I didn't have to take my thoughts about myself seriously, and actually life would be easier if I didn't, then my eczema cleared up, as well as all these other symptoms that I were having that people normally associate with perimenopause and menopause. So there's a whole range of physical and emotional symptoms that I was having miraculously cleared up through insight, right? So how does that make any sense, right? How does that make any sense in the world that we understand of hormones running wild, destroying our skin or our mood or our sleep or our whatever we want to blame on them? Like, how can we fix our hormones just through insight? So maybe it isn't our hormones at all. Like, maybe our hormones aren't getting it wrong. Maybe our hormones are just getting it right, which is really, the title of this talk. And maybe our hormones are allowing us to enter this sensitive time, whether it's when we're in our teenage years when we're pregnant or postpartum, or when we're moving towards menopause, for a good reason. Like, we're supposed to be in this sensitive time. We're supposed to understand things about life that are going to help us. And so when we experience something that we might blame on our hormones, like eczema, like acne, like whatever it is, maybe that's just a sign from our body, from our hormones, that something is out of balance. And for different people, that sign will come through in different ways. So for me, obviously, my skin being sensitive, that's how it comes through. For people who suffer from, severe acne in their teenage years, and then, by the way, they often get it when they're pregnant, and then, by the way, they often get it when they're in perimenopause, that their skin is just sensitive. So when something is out of balance, and here we're going to talk about our psychological well-being, right? And spiritual well-being, but it could also be the diet. It could also be our lack of sleep. Well, when something's out of balance in our body, our hormones are perfectly lined up to help send signals. And so some people will come through the skin, some people will be migraines, some people will be severe anxiety, some people it will be insomnia, some people, it will be the stomach that often comes out, when people have a sensitive stomach, then that will be the first thing to show up with some kind of problem. And then again, that will appear in teenage years when a woman's pregnant, and also when she's going through perimenopause. So in these times of hormonal flux, I think it will be a really good idea if we say, oh, maybe our hormones don't exist outside the wisdom that runs the rest of our body, right? How could it be that there are these millions of processes going on in my body, your body, everybody's body at every moment of the day, and they are brilliant? Like, is it possible that the hormones sit outside of that brilliance? Like, is it possible that at certain times in our life, when hormones start to fluctuate, that they just get it wrong and that there's no wisdom involved? Like, for me, that really doesn't make any sense. So that's how I'd like to start, if you'd like to ask me to take it in a certain direction.
Yeah, that's really great. That makes total sense. So yeah. And even so one of the other things that in the teens and 20s, when the hormones are fluctuating, one of the big things is mood, isn't it? Is like all the moods seem to be going up and down, and getting angry feelings or getting really anxious feelings, or all of those sorts of things. So maybe you could talk a bit more about that and how that fits in with hormones.
Right. So when we're if we come from this position of maybe just my body, like, this is what I'd really like people to think about. It's like, maybe my body is brilliant. Like, maybe since no one had to interfere when I transformed from a baby to a girl, or from a baby to a boy, or whatever the journey was for that person, and then to a teenager, and then to a young person, a young adult, etc. Like, for most of us, we don't need any interference, right? The body just knows how to do that. So maybe if we come from this idea of, if my body knew how to do all those brilliant things to take me through adolescence and beyond, like, maybe it also knows what it's doing in my teenage years, or at times when hormones are fluctuating. And so maybe if I'm feeling anxious or depressed, or like I'm suffering from mood swings, or it seems like my mood is not something that I can control, or something like that, maybe that's not something that's outside of wisdom either, right? Maybe that's not something that's malfunctioning in my brain. Maybe that's not chemicals that aren't getting it right, but maybe there's something there for me to understand. And we come through life so often thinking that when my mood is swinging, when I'm feeling incredibly anxious or incredibly down, depressed, then there is something real about that experience. That experience is pointing to something real in my reality, when actually those feelings, however strong they are just a divine guide. They are part of the wisdom that runs through us. They are divine guide pointing us to something that is going on in our thinking in the moment. And it may start with just like this uncomfortable feeling. Like we can be having thoughts about how badly I did in an exam or in an interview or something like that. And that will just start with sort of a bad feeling. And that initial bad feeling is like the first reading on the barometer to tell us, oh, your thinking right now is down there. And so the wisdom in the body has created this feeling to point that out to us. The feeling isn't telling us, oh yeah, now my life is a disaster because I think I flunked that exam, right? The feeling is telling us, your thinking right now is low, and maybe you're thinking life is a disaster, but that's not what's actually going on, right? Because we can't experience what's going on apart from in our thinking. So it's just pointing to where our thinking is right now in this moment. And then maybe in our day, we kind of forget about the exam or the bad job interview or whatever it is. And we get a different feeling, right? And there's nothing that's actually changed in our reality. We didn't redo the exam, didn't redo the interview, but maybe we're just watching something on Netflix, right? And so we're feeling different. And then we go back to that feeling. Then if we take that, and because we're back in like a different state of mind, we're back in that thinking about, oh God, life is a disaster. Now, if we go into those thoughts and start taking them more and more seriously and start thinking, oh yeah, my life is a disaster. Oh yeah, I'm never going to recover from this. Oh yeah, I'm never going to have another job interview. Oh yeah, there's no other jobs but this one for me, or whatever it is, right? I'm never like, and we don't know, of course, we don't know if the job interview was really bad, and we don't know if we didn't want that job anyway, and there's another one waiting for us, and we don't know. But we don't know. We're making up a story about what we think the future is going to be and how awful it's going to be. And then if we start taking those thoughts really seriously, the feeling of not so great, what that not so great constricted feeling starts getting stronger. And then it can start becoming anxiety, or it can start becoming a panic attack. And so then what's that? That's just the wisdom inside speaking a bit louder. And it's saying, oh, your thinking is now really, really low. And I want to point that out to you, because actually, if you're going to stay there, then it becomes difficult for the body to function properly. It becomes difficult for the body, for example, to detoxify like it needs to detoxify, which is what was going on with me, in my hormonal sensitive years, right? And especially over the last, when I was having perimenopause symptoms, it was leading up to menopause, when I was taking a whole lot of thinking about my life seriously and getting all this eczema, right? And so what was going on is that my body was also giving me these really bad feelings, to point out where my thinking was. It was creating all these feelings. And I just thought that just meant that it was real, that the thoughts I was having were real, and that my reality really looked like that. That was my real experience, rather than realizing that that was my body just like gently, and then not so gently, and then really not so gently, trying to knock me on the head and say, maybe you want to lighten up. Like, maybe you can see that that's just thought, and it doesn't define you, and you don't actually have to take it seriously. So as soon as I managed to take my thinking more seriously, I was able to clear up my symptoms like eczema, because my body was able to work as it wanted to in a healthy way, because I wasn't stepping in and interfering in it by creating high levels of stress. Now, it's all innocent when we do that. Like, we don't know better when we do that. We haven't been taught how the experience that we have in our lives is really created. But there is an opportunity through these videos that you're sharing with the world for people to see something new that hopefully will be really helpful, and to see that our feelings are actually not telling us anything about what's true out there. They're just telling us about where our state of mind is inside. And they're telling us that because if we keep holding on to thoughts that aren't creating a nice feeling, then our body finds it more and more difficult to function in an optimum way. And so what will start with a bad feeling, constricted feeling, nervousness, anxiousness, panic attack, may also start leading to more physical symptoms as the body, struggles to work with the conditions that it's presented with. So,
yeah, there's a couple of things that have come to my mind while you're saying that. One is a story that I was telling yesterday, which is about, and it may not seem relevant to this at first, but actually it is, because it's all about the same thing, is that when I was doing general practice, there was a girl in the practice who, she was 18, she went away to college, and she put loads and loads and loads of pressure on herself to do well. And she was working really hard. And she had a psychotic breakdown. And when she came back to, it's a longer story, but when she came back to the practice and I was talking to her about it, because her parents didn't want her treated like, she had a label of schizophrenia and all sorts of things. And when I was talking to her about it, I said to her, look, you were just under lots of pressure, and we all have. This is before I understood this understanding, right? So I just said to her, look, we all have different ways of coping with, when everything's getting too much for us. Some people get headaches, some people get stomach aches, some people get, to try and tell them that something, that they're not dealing with it in the best possible way for them, and that they need to, right. So I said, and you just got, eventually your body was telling you and telling you and telling you, and eventually nothing, you weren't changing anything, you were still carrying on doing the same thing, and your mind just said, right, that's it, we're out of here. I'm not doing it anymore, you can't do this anymore, and I'm taking you out of it, and takes you somewhere better. And she said, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened. We went, I went somewhere really lovely, and there were lovely bunny rabbits and all sorts of nice stuff, And then she understood, and I said, well, it's nothing to do with the labels that they're putting on it. It's just that you are designed to your body is doing what's best for you. So it seems from the outside that it's not the best, it's like the medical diagnosis gives you, this is something terrible. It wasn't. It was your whole system was saving you from what you were from the bad things you were doing to yourself. So, and that sounds like what you're saying now to me. That's
right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. And another example that maybe people can relate to is when we find ourselves with the flu, for example, right? So often when we find ourselves sick with the temperature, I don't know whether it has to be flu, but let's say sick with the temperature in bed, we can look back and we can say, oh yeah, I was really stressed, and I was working too much, and I was partying too much, and yeah, I guess this is now what's come, because I was just working too much. So in that level, we say those things, but then, like, what's really going on? The body's saying, okay, I really need you to rest, because I can't work in an optimum level, and I can't maintain your health, and the immune system isn't going to be as strong as it normally could be. And then a virus comes along and you catch it, and then guess what? You have to stay in bed, and so the body gets what it wants. Right? You rest up, and maybe you have an idea, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be, partying so late, working so hard, so stressed out, because that's what happens when I do. And these are like, we can see that often when we get the flu or fever or a bad cold or something, we can see that. But when we're in a society that has this narrative about hormones, for example, or mental health, right, and how it works, and the dominant narrative of how that works, it's hard for us to see things another way, and it's hard for us to remove ourselves from this story of, yeah, we can be broken because of my genes or my history or my whatever, and thus I need to be fixed. And oh yeah, it's my hormones that are driving me crazy, giving me acne, doing that, making my life a misery, and there's nothing I can do because it's my hormones. And so when we say that, we like put a part of us, like this patient you were talking about, who sort of put her mind out of wisdom, as if like it wasn't connected, when actually it was. It was just doing an amazing thing. And our hormones remain also, even when they fluctuate, they remain connected to this wisdom. So, like, I'd like to speak a little bit also about women and their menstrual cycles, because that's something where we go through so much of our lives as women thinking, oh, my period is awful, my menstrual cycle drives me nuts, PMS is from hell, and I just want to stop it. And so over the last decades or so, women have been taking all kinds of hormonal concoctions in contraceptive pills, in injections, in patches, with IUD devices, with hormones, without hormones, to try and stop their cycle, or make their cycle change in some way that seems to be more suitable to their life. And today we're discovering that when we go in and start playing with our cycles, if it's something that needs to be fixed, then there are consequences. And so today there's more and more research about the contraceptive pill increasing risks of depression and even suicide. And I was not surprised to read new studies coming out about links between the contraceptive pill and autoimmune disease. Now, I've also read articles about why, for example, women are sometimes like 8 times more or 10 times more likely to get certain autoimmune diseases. And people are saying, well, why is that happening to women? And I've read things like, oh, because women aren't having enough children these days, and so their womb isn't in operation most of the time, and things like that. And people are taking it seriously. And the thing is, like, if you look at what we have done to millions of years of evolution that has created this rather magnificent cycle that allows us to give life and to tune in actually to what's going on in our body, in a cyclical way, that we can see different aspects almost of our life if we do actually tune into our menstrual cycle and we work with it rather than trying to suppress it or make it stop or something like that. Then we've come in over the last few decades and thought, oh yeah, we can just mix with that. We can just mix with that evolutionary wisdom of the way the woman works with her cycle, and that won't have any consequences. And now people are realizing, oh wait, there does seem to be links. Maybe this 8 times likelihood, women are 8 times more likely to get all these different chronic diseases, has something to do with the fact that there is this very wise cyclical menstrual cycle that we live with for so many years, and we've been trying to pull it apart, and we've been trying to disconnect from it. And it's like almost if in agriculture you grow crops out of season, right? It's not going to end well. Your crops are going to die, right? And you're not going to get what you want. And if we say, oh yeah, there's this cycle, but I'm going to completely ignore it, or I'm going to manipulate it, or I'm going to go in and I'm going to try and fix it, or I'm going to try and overcome it, then it's not always going to end up well. Now, I'm not saying that if you take the contraceptive pill, then X plus X equals Y. No, that's not the way medicine works. And we know that. And we know that, it can't be that every single woman who's ever taken the contraceptive pill is then going to go on and develop autoimmune disease. There's a whole load of other things that can come sort of in between. That doesn't make that happen. But there is an increased risk, and women don't know about these risks when we say, yes, I do want to manipulate my cycle. Yes, I do want to interfere. No, I don't want to have my period. Rather than saying, oh, what could possibly be the wisdom in my cycle? What could happen if I actually worked with my cycle, just like farmers will work with the seasons to grow their crops, and just like they will put them on certain kind of land, certain kind of crops on certain kind of land, and they're planted in different times of the year. And so if we say, well, evolution has worked this out for us, that we do have this menstrual cycle and it does have a lot of power, then perhaps we could actually take our lives to a much happier place if we were working with it rather than going in and trying to manipulate it. Now, I know that there'll be some women saying, yeah, but my period pain and it ruins my life, and I've got this and my periods are so heavy. And again, when we suffer from really bad period pain or very long periods, we think that that's my body going crazy, right? That there's something malfunctioning on a hormonal level. And so I need to fix it, rather than taking the holistic approach and looking back at the big picture and saying, what if, right? What if I made some lifestyle changes? What if I examined the levels of stress in my life? Like, how would that change my menstrual cycle? What if I examined my diet? Like, could that change my menstrual cycle? What if I got more sleep? Could that change my menstrual cycle? Rather than, because the menstrual cycle doesn't normally just go, off the charts in terms of pain and bleeding, etc., without something else going on in the background. And we can understand our menstrual cycle as another barometer reading of where I am in my life and whether I'm living a lifestyle which is healthy for me. And so rather than when you say, yeah, but I've got fibroids, and yeah, but I have this period pain, yeah, and I know it's difficult because the whole of society is not at all constructed to take women's life cycles into account, not at all. And we've been thinking for the last 100 years or more that we need to overcome our biology in order to fit in with this society. And now there's a move, especially with menstrual cycle awareness, etc., and different movements that are evolving over the last few decades, that wait a minute, maybe that's not what we're supposed to do. Like, maybe this idea of we need to manipulate our bodies, manipulate our hormones, manipulate our cycles to succeed in this male created world isn't actually good for our health. So, like, I'm putting these ideas out there, and people say, oh, maybe that's true. Like, and I know, like, I spent decades, sort of like, oh, I've got PMS. Oh, I'll just ignore it. I'm getting my period tomorrow, right? Or, and lo and behold, as you approach menopause, PMS can be 2 weeks long. So you can't say I'm getting my period tomorrow because it just goes on and on. And then you can't ignore it. But what is PMS, right? PMS is just this sensitive, really sensitive day or two before we get our period, when we're in like a stage of hormonal flux. But it actually gives us this window, this intuitive window into what's going on in our life. So instead of us approaching our periods and PMS as sort of like a downer and a time when I'm just going to cry and I'm just going to try and ignore it, like, it actually shows up. It can, it can actually show us sort of, it can shine a light on what's going on in our life. And we can reach some insights, some pretty amazing insights when we're in a sensitive, more intuitive time in our life. But that would make us perhaps more powerful than society would want us to be as women, using the powers of our menstrual cycle. Because society's been pretty keen on just blocking it, sort of, muting it and mutating it through different contraceptive devices. And I even heard a doctor, actually, if people want to, there was a video that's on the Guardian website. I think it's called Vaginal Dispatches or something. It's a whole number of videos. And one of them is about, can we make our periods stop? And they interview a doctor in Brazil who was doing all this research into different injections that women can take to stop their periods. And he was just like, periods they're not natural. Like, they're not really found in the animal kingdom. They're not natural. A natural state for a woman to be is pregnant and giving birth. And so he was one of these doctors that developed these injections that women took to stop their period. And then they interviewed this woman who stopped her period and developed early onset osteoporosis. So we might want to think again before we try and sort of break up, manipulate something that evolution has developed for us over millions of years.
What's coming to my mind is that if someone has really bad period pain, and I can remember having really bad period pain at one stage, right? So if you're in the middle of really, really bad period pain, it's number one, how would you deal with that? And number two, I'm thinking, if it is to do with giving us a message about what's going on in our lives generally, then maybe during the pain is not necessarily the time to be wondering about that. Maybe if people have this understanding about how our experience works, then that might make a difference outside of the time when you have the pain, so that maybe the pain doesn't come, or maybe it's less, or maybe it's easier to deal with when it does come. What would you say about that?
Yeah, the word that springs to mind is compassion. And I talk to women about compassion all the time, because we live our lives so often disconnected from what our body really needs. And then we push through. And I've totally been there with bad period pain. You know, I used to have to take, whatever pill to get rid of the pain, every month, and sit there with a water bottle. And when I was a teenager, it used to be so bad, like it would actually literally make me vomit from the pain. So I've certainly been I've certainly experienced that. But what we don't have for ourselves so often in those moments is compassion. And I know that if someone is in the middle of their exams, or working in some busy corporate job, or even not busy corporate job, just a teacher in front of a classroom, like if you're suffering from period pain, or you're the day before your period, then like it's hard to say, oh yeah, I would just like to go into bed now, right? But there is this idea that perhaps you can't go into bed if you're standing in front of the classroom. But is there something, one thing, two things that you can do that could just allow you to be a little bit more compassionate with yourself at that time? Because we think, oh, I've got my period, I'm going to push through, I'm going to take a pill to get rid of the pain, I'm going to, I'm just going to ignore it, I'm not going to, and we don't have any compassion for ourselves, because we think, oh God, it's that period again, that damn period that always comes at the worst time, or whatever it is, whatever attitudes we have regarding menstruation and how it interferes with our life. And the thing is, we can't escape it, actually, without possible consequences. There are these vaccines you can take, or these, not vaccines, injections you can take, or these devices that you can put in you, etc. But as we're seeing, that isn't necessarily without consequences further on down the line. And the sooner we can really try and tune into our body in a way and say, well, what might my body need right now? Right. And again, if you're in the middle of a meeting or a school classroom, etc., maybe right now is not right now, but it could mean this evening. It could mean, oh, I'm going to cancel that plan for this evening, and I'm just going to go to bed really early, and I'm going to just eat maybe really healthily this week. I mean, maybe every week, but maybe I'm going to make an extra effort this week, and maybe I'm going to cut out alcohol this week. Maybe I'm going to just think about what I could do to nurture myself this week, rather than pushing through. And I say that totally understanding how difficult that can be. And I'm not saying that's how I lived my life most of my reproductive years, because it's not, because I just came and said, no, I'm just going to push through, and I'm just going to take a painkiller, and I'm just going to push through. And these days, I just I've managed to tune into my body in such a different level that I will sometimes go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening, because I'm about to get my period, and I feel that that's exactly what my body needs. And I don't run off into that story of I can't do that, I can't go to bed at 6 o'clock because blah, 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 right? Because I should be doing whatever I should be doing, right? So if we can just say, well, if I can be compassionate with myself, if I can just allow myself to do something that will nourish me in those sensitive days before the menstrual cycle, during the menstrual cycle, let me see if that has, an effect, has an impact. Maybe I'm going to have a different experience of my menstrual cycle. And there's a lot out there these days. This isn't, necessarily my point of expertise, but there's a lot out there these days about menstrual cycle awareness. And I'm thinking of a book called Wild Power by the founders of Red School. And it's just, there's a lot that women can read today that wasn't at all available when we were.
That's true. And I think what people, once people know that we have this inner wisdom anyway, that we don't have to listen to the thinking, because the thinking is not us and doesn't actually know what it's talking about. And behind all of that thinking, we have the inner wisdom that will show us what's best for us. So it's not about what did everybody else do. And there are, as you said, there are lots of books and one of those books might be the right one for you. But your inner wisdom is the bit that knows that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that we live, I'm like pointing to different books because we live in such a society that's so dominated by this idea of we're going to overcome the female biology somehow, and that we're not going to respect our menstrual cycles, and that that's going to make us weak, and it didn't always used to be like that across all societies. And I'm not saying we should go to a society like in some developing countries where girls are sent out to an outhouse to sit there during their periods, right? That we don't want to go there, obviously, but to be able to respect our cycles and to give ourselves time and to express compassion with ourselves and to say, well, this feeling of feeling a little weaker or needing to rest more or needing to look inside more at that time around around our bleed, then maybe I can respect that. Like maybe there is a way for me to respect that. And like you're saying, that's the wisdom of your body. Sometimes it's just like we need help to peel off this story that we've been carrying around with us about how our periods interfere with our lives and how much better it would just be if they would just stop. And once we can just shift that a bit and say, oh, well, what if there is wisdom in my menstrual cycle? What if there is wisdom in my hormones? What if my hormones aren't getting it right? Like maybe to perform the best that I can perform in life, whatever you want to, class that sort of performance, I actually could respect my menstrual cycle. And then I would be able to ride the wisdom that comes through the month, rather than just thinking, I'm just going to be, the same the whole month. There is no change. And that's so much part of my work, saying, well, a woman's life is about change. It's about change every month. And it's about change as, she moves through adolescent years, I mean, for boys too, but then also through her reproductive years and through menopause. And so much as what's been thrown at us over the last decades is to not change, right? So when people take the contraceptive pill, you totally detach yourself from the changes that go on in your menstrual cycle and the wisdom that exists there that can protect us in terms of our health. And when we take hormones like throughout our life and through to menopause and beyond, that also is an attempt to mute the change, to say, don't change. No Change was a book that was released in the late 60s about, that's the way we should go through menopause, like no change. And that's the way women have thought we should go through our menstrual cycles or we should relate to our hormones, that there is no change. I just want it to be the same. So going back to that first example I used about the acne. So for a girl or a boy who's suffering from acne, and saying, well, you know, when I was 10, I didn't have it, and now I'm changing my hormones. Like, we can't stop that change. There's a purpose for that change. And there's a purpose for adolescence. And there's a purpose for the hormones creating this sensitive time. Once we learn to embrace that change and show ourselves compassion and understand, oh yeah, when my hormones are fluctuating, I'm in a sensitive time. So I can be compassionate with myself. And whether that's going to be throughout my teenage years, or whether if I'm a woman, that's going to be before every period, every bleed, then, you know, that's life-changing.
That also just reminded me of the podcasts that Dr. Bill Pettit's done around every single psychiatric diagnosis, but also on physical health. So he did one on physical health and explained how the physical body, how we do, obviously there are changes, there are physical changes, the hormones are changing, and those do affect how we see the world, how we experience the world, and so on. But he explains in his podcast about how the way we take our thoughts seriously affects the chemicals in our body that then affect our hormones. And that's really interesting to listen to, because that is backing up what you're saying, and that he talks about how anxiety, for example, is our friend, in the same way that you're saying, well, these other changes are our friend, and they're actually there to tell us where we're going and how we might be looking in the wrong direction. So yeah, that might be worth people listening to as well, to listen to
Absolutely.
those podcasts to go with this, because that really explains. And he obviously trained as a physical doctor first before he became a psychiatrist, and he understands all the physiology and explains how that works in terms of how it changes everything in your body, and how when we stop taking thought seriously, which is, you know, it's such a simple thing, when we know if we just stop taking all thought seriously and don't start, and as you say, all the suffering is all to do with resisting how we're feeling, resisting what's actually going on in our lives, resisting the changes. But when we stop resisting and stop listening to all the thoughts that say it shouldn't be this way, it shouldn't be that way, this isn't what should be happening, things change amazingly. And but again, it's people need to, not need to, but if you, as you said, experiment with that and just see. It's about, yeah, giving it a go and saying, well, if I just stopped listening to all that thinking about how it should be or how it shouldn't be, I wonder what difference that would make.
Right. Yeah. And it's just really saying that our body is just running through wisdom all the time, right? So just like Dr. Bill Pettit says on those podcasts, and I know this is hard for people to hear when they're suffering from symptoms, but like, symptoms are a blessing because they are our guides. So in the past, when, you know, I've been down in symptoms when I was experiencing all kinds of symptoms going through perimenopause, leading up to menopause, you know, it would seem impossible to me. And I probably want to just run away from someone who said to me, your symptoms are a blessing, you know, accept them as that. Because when you're deep in the trenches of your symptoms, they do not feel a blessing whatsoever, right? But if we can just be open to that idea of my symptoms, whether it's my anxiety or depression or panic attacks or migraines or night sweats or eczema or, you know, anything, these are my guides. These are my guides that come through wisdom, that my body is saying, I can't function optimally right now because the conditions aren't great, right? And so often the conditions aren't great because we're caught up in these stories of the kind of person I'm supposed to be, and am I enough, and I'm a failure, and nobody loves me, or I'm never going to have a great relationship, and all of these stories that we create based on maybe something that's gone on in the past that we think, for example, let's just take the example of relationships. You know, I've spoken to women who are like, well, no, what, every single relationship I've had is a failed relationship. I'm never going to be in a good, healthy relationship. And then we look at that, and that idea is based on the fact that she hasn't had a great relationship until now. And, you know, and the conclusion is there is no conclusion. The conclusion is she's still learning about relationships, right? And that doesn't mean anything. That means just, you know, we could say, oh yeah, that one wasn't so great for you, that one wasn't so great for you, that wasn't, and that's it, right? And then I speak to these women who are like, oh yeah, I never had a great relationship until I had one. So there, you know, we make up these stories innocently because we think about the past and it feels so traumatic, or it feels so real that it will project onto the future. And when we have these feelings that constrict us, and we inside we think, well, there must be something, you know, real about the situation. It must be telling me something because I feel so bad. When actually the feeling is just pointing out where our thinking is in that moment. And it's designed to do that, to help us lighten up. Like, that's the beauty of design. And that's the beauty of our symptoms as well. And I know people like, beauty of symptoms, like, what the hell is that? Right? But that's true, right? Because it comes from the body that's always run through wisdom. And there is beauty in our symptoms because it's divine. The feelings we have are divine. The anxiety we experience is divine. The panic attack is divine because it's all divinely guided to help us. You know, it's our divine guidance in life. And we never know that it is until we wake up to the fact that it is. And when we do, mind-blowing, totally mind-blowing, because we realize those stories that I thought were real, the stories that I thought defined me, the story that I kept telling myself that I wasn't enough, like, that's just thought. That's like made up. Doesn't say anything about now, the future, doesn't say anything, right? It's just something that I took seriously. And then my body was trying to tell me all these years, don't take that seriously, right? Please lighten up. Please see what you're doing. Oh, you didn't get that, like, you didn't get that feeling? I'm going to send you a panic attack, right? Until you get that. Oh, you didn't get the panic attack? I'm going to make you feel really depressed. I'm going to give you, you know, psychotic exit from this real world. And we think that means I'm broken. No, you are never broken. We are never broken. We are working, our body's working for us. It's divinely guided. It's divinely energized to help us. And we can really help ourselves if we can tune into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So before you say if there's anything else that you want to say or to sum up, or I'm just going to make sure if anyone has any questions. So if anyone has any questions, you can type them into the chat box, or any comments, or if you'd like to, you can put your hand up and you can come on. Hang on, somebody. Okay. So that's Iona saying, wow, this helps a lot. Thanks. I'm going through this right now, and it's helping me find compassion for myself. And I think you missed, Iona, me mentioning the podcasts that Dr. Bill has done, and I will put a link for that underneath the video as well, because we were just discussing how he explains the physical side of it and how that works. So. But so that was no question, but thanks, Iona, that's lovely. Anyone else have any questions or comments? And if not, we're just going to sum up and see if there's anything else that you want to say that you want to add before
Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that Iona's like getting what she's getting from that, and compassion is such a beautiful. It's not a tool. It's just like if we can experience that, then things become simpler. Really, things become simpler. And even when we think our hormones are raging, if we can say, okay, I'm just going through change, and that change is not something that my body thought of, right? This is a process of millions of years of evolution and brilliance that's coming through my body in this lifetime. And maybe I can respect that, right? Because maybe that no matter what I've thought before about my body and my hormones and my periods and whatever it is, maybe my body is just connected to this brilliance, because all our bodies are.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And hang on, we do have a question now. What's the best way to touch base with yourself? Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in just one moment. I own it. Like, do you remind yourself because oh, okay, so I'm misunderstanding. Do you remind yourself because I often forget and get so wrapped up in the whirlwind of hormones and emotions and I forget. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'll just, if I can speak to that, just, we spoke a little bit about the feeling that we have. And, you know, it's taken me years to see this. So it's fine, wherever you are, whatever you see. But I can see now that my feeling really is my divine guide. And it's okay when I'm off in my head, believing some story, thinking some disaster. Like, it's okay when I'm there, because we all go there and we all come back. And so we're either remembering that this is my thinking, just going off on a journey, or we forget. And then we think, oh no, this is real life, right? This is real terrible life, you know, and this is my body malfunctioning. And I can still go there, but I know that I won't be there for long, because I have this understanding. But it's okay when I am. And it's okay when I'm angry at the world and shouting at my kids, and, you know, better that I'm not, but I do. Because I forget, right? I forget that I'm experiencing everything through my thinking in the moment. But my feeling is always my guide. So I've understood that if I'm just a little bit aware of my feeling, then I'll know where I am. If I'm feeling constricted and fearful and down, I don't have to take any of that seriously. Like, I don't have to take my thinking in that moment seriously. And there's nothing for me to do. I don't have to try and replace that thinking that I have in that moment. I don't have to try and say, okay, now I'm going to be positive and I'm going to, you know, have a different outlook on life, and I'm going to remember what so-and-so said in that video that I watched. No, I just have to wait. I wait. And then a fresh thought comes along, and then another one. And sooner or later, my feeling will change. So when I'm in that constricted feeling, I'm okay that I'm there, because we're all there. We all have times when we're there. And there's nothing to do. I just let it pass, and it will pass. And that is my guide. Oh, I'm feeling like this. Oh, okay. I can just wait. I can just see what else will come along. I can just know that that story that's really running through my head on loud volume right now isn't true. That's just the story that happens to be running through my head, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it will go. And then there'll be times when I'll have this awareness of my feeling, and my feeling is calm and it's peaceful. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is where I like to be. Now, I'm not always going to be there, because I'm a human. So I'm going to be going up and down and up and down and all around. But when I'm in the constriction, the fear, whatever it is, that feeling that doesn't feel nice, I don't have to get too serious about that, because the feeling came to guide me. And that divine feeling is like, it's like divinity in my pocket, really, because it's always with me. And that's all I need to be aware of, to guide me. And I don't need to do anything. It will just, different thoughts come, a different story will arise, and that will come with a different feeling. And when I get a nice feeling, go with that. That's as simple as it gets.
Yeah, brilliant. So if anyone watching this now or watching it afterwards has any more questions for Tania, then you can post them underneath the video. Oh, hang on one second. This is from Anya. I like your point of treating symptoms as a helpful tool in managing our health. Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks, Anya. So yeah, so if anyone has, that would be lovely if you can post that underneath the video so that other people get the idea. But also, if you have any more questions, if you have any more comments, you'll be able to post them underneath the video on YouTube here. And I will be able to pass them on to Tania so she gets to see them and she can answer them too. So thanks so much, Tania, for being here. That's been really, really good, really helpful. And I'm glad people were able to join us too. So that's very good. So I'll be seeing you soon, I'm sure. And thanks for being here. Thanks.
Lovely to share.
Bye, everyone.